Welcome to the spotlight topic for Workbook 1, Roles, Permissions and Users. In this module here, we talk about how roles are the foundation for data security in your NetSuite account. You need to decide what controls access to NetSuite, who is a user, what is a role, how do permissions control access, and how do I start working with my roles. Data security is actually anchored in the defined user access that's based on users, roles, and permissions. Role is a defined access configuration of permissions that's assigned to each user. User is any individual who has access to a NetSuite account. And it could be an employee, a customer, a vendor, a partner. Center is the navigation path assigned to a role, so it controls the navigation. At the end of this module here, you should be able to identify users, examine an overview and impact of roles, investigate layers of access on a role, and look at standard roles as the basis for your custom roles. What is a role? Now, NetSuite actually gives you a set of standard roles that's already provisioned in your NetSuite account. But we don't recommend you using these standard roles for your roles. You should create a role based on the standard roles and assign the custom roles, which we're later going to discuss in a later module. A role is a configured access that's assigned to users, and it's defined by a set of permissions, a level for each of those permissions, and restrictions that modify your permissions. Permissions and access levels. A set of permissions is provided in your NetSuite account, and this governs and defines a user's access and view of your account data. The levels of the permissions you have are View, Create, Edit, and Full. The View permission only allows you to view. The Create allows you to create new ones only and view. And Edit allows you to create new ones, view, and edit existing ones. The only difference between the Full and all the other roles is the fact that you can actually delete records as well, as long as those records don't have any dependent or child records. Every permission that you have is assigned an access level. For example, if we're giving someone sales orders permission, do they have View, Create, Edit, or Full access to the sales order? On top of that, there are layers on a role. The one that we just talked about in terms of View, Create, Edit, and Full is the first layer. That's a permission. In this example here, we've got a salesperson role that will work with sales orders. They have the permission to edit sales orders. They can edit any sales orders. That's the first layer. And you can stay there if you want. You don't have to move on to the second layer. The second layer says, okay, they can have access to edit any sales orders, but only their own ones where they are a sales rep to. The third one says, well, what about the other sales orders? Well, they can view it. And then the fourth one assigns a custom form which determines what fields they have access to. And that's talked about in Workbook 2 with the customization modules. Now, every role is assigned a center. And if you use one of the standard roles that NetSuite has created, they already have centers assigned to them. And these centers determine what are the tabbed pages, what's the menus that helps optimize the navigation. The classic interface one is the one that we use as an administrator. What it has is this transactions and lists menu. Every menu is organized into either a transaction menu or a list menu. Finance center. So obviously this is assigned to like the accountant and the CFO, AP clerk, AR clerk. What are they interested in? Customers, vendors, payroll, financial information. All the menus that they can access is organized into these ones here that are more logical for their role. Same as shipping, receiving, inventory. Sales Center has leads, opportunities, customers, forecasting. Now, if you prefer not to use these special optimized navigation, all these users can actually use the same classic interface, this one, Transactions List, by updating their user preferences and checking Use Classic Interface. Now, in terms of center-role relationship, this is a portion of a list that you can find in Help. And it shows you a list of all NetSuite standard centers and their supported roles. If you can see here, the accounting center, this has been assigned to these roles: accountant, the bookkeeper, the payroll manager, AP clerk, AR clerk. Now, all these roles have some common tabs to them. The home page, activities, documents, setup. That's common to all the centers, as you saw back here, right? Home, activities, documents, setup, support. What I'd like you to do now is complete the next true or false questions and see how you go with that. Let me go through a walkthrough now to review some standard roles and compare. We're going to select a standard role, review that administrator role, and customize that role. What we're also going to do is identify the differences between your roles as well. Let's go into NetSuite and have a look. What you'll see here is a list of about 30 roles with standard. Let's sort it by standard by clicking on that custom standard there. All right, we've created one already for custom. So these are all the standard roles. And these roles have been created based on typical positions in an organization: an accountant, a CEO, a bookkeeper, a salesperson, a sales manager, warehouse manager. And this is a great starting point for you to start with your roles. You'll also see the centers they've been automatically assigned to: accounting center, customer center, support center, sales center. What you'll notice, let's sort by the name by clicking on the name, is that there's no administrator here. And that's because the administrator role is a full access role, in that it has access to everything. So we don't want to give you that role to modify. If you do want to have like a backup administrator, we suggest to use the system administrator role as a starting point instead. It has fewer permissions than the administrator. If you want to know what the difference is between the roles, so you might see here accountant, accountant reviewer. You can go to Setup, User Roles, Show Role Differences. And in here, we can choose what's the base role, accountant, and what do we want to compare it to, accountant reviewer. You can actually select multiple roles as well if you want by clicking on the control button on your keyboard and mouse clicking AP AR clerk. You can also check only show differences if you only want to see the differences, and then click on show. From here, you'll see the differences. What it does is says, here's the category that's in, either list, reports, transactions, or setup. This is the name of the permission, and this is the level that it's been assigned to the accountant. We can see between the accountant and accountant reviewer, it looks like the accountant has edit access, while the reviewer only has view access to certain things. And you can also see the difference between the accountant and the AR clerk or the AP clerk as well. And these can be exported via Excel or CSV by clicking on these roles here. If I do want to modify any of these roles, I can go back into my Manage Roles and click on the Customize. For example, let's take the accountant role and customize that. When you customize it, it does not allow you to save over the original standard accountant role, so you do have to rename it. It will prefix it with custom. Please don't leave it as custom. Rename it using your company's initials, so anything that you've created has a naming convention, and then hence it's all grouped together as well. Make sure you do that. You'll see that the accounting center type has been inherited from the original accountant role. You'll also notice subsidiaries. Now, if no subsidiary is selected, right, then it will look at the subsidiary on the user. If you do select some subsidiaries, then it will override what the user has and give them access to these two companies. I'm going to leave it blank, so therefore it's a bit more flexible and can be used on multiple users. Level 1 was permissions, layer 1, and these are the 4 sets of permissions you can give: transactions, reports, lists, and setup. Under transactions, I can review them and delete or add things as necessary. I don't want my accountant to adjust inventory, so I might either just remove the access or change the access to view. Okay, let's see what else they can do. Bill purchase orders, bill sales orders, bills, cash sales checks, they seem to be quite right. Now, enter opening balances, they won't need to do that because we only need to do that in the beginning, so we'll remove that. And then if there's anything else they need to do, you can come down the bottom here and add it to the list, as well as your layers that you have there, the levels that you have there. That was layer 1. Layer 2 is up here. We can restrict them so they can only see their own things. Now, layer 2 is over the whole permissions. It does not just relate to the one permission. It relates to all permissions down below. And it can be an employee, department, class, location restriction. And if you do put a restriction here, then you can tick, can they allow viewing or not as well. Put none, no default. The 4th is in the forms. You can say what forms they can access. You can also define searches they can access, any user preferences that we prefer them to have, the dashboard we want to publish to them, and if you have multi-language on, translation. Let's save that there. Let's recap what we've just done there. We had a look at the standard roles. And the standard roles, there's about 30 there, and they're at the basis for your custom roles. So you would customize them to make them your own. It's easier to start from a standard role than start from scratch. The administrator role is a full access role. Hence, you cannot customize that role. As specified, if you do want to customize an administrator role, we suggest using the system administrator role. If you want to customize a role, it's best to start off with a standard role and customize it. Enter the name of the role starting with your company's prefix. Remember, it's a best practice and you should implement it as a naming convention. Define the permissions, so that's the records the role can see, and what level of access they require. Review any restrictions and define those as well. Can they access their own subordinates or own subordinates and assigned, or can they access everything? Third layer was the fields. What fields can they view and assign to them? And the 4th layer was assign a custom form. They're all the things that we did in the role. There were other subtabs as well that you can customize for that role. The searches, to set default searches to be used for the user. The preferences, so the user preferences that you as an administrator can set. Now you've seen preferences in different areas: user preferences, role preferences, subsidiary preferences, company preferences. This chart compares the different preference levels. What affects what? There was a dashboard tab where you can select the published dashboard to assign to all users within this role. And there's a translation tab that allows you to work with multi-language features and translate custom fields. Let's go ahead and do this match game. There are 4 terms, and I want you to match them to the task's descriptions and see how you go. Users, roles and permissions. What are some best practice? As I mentioned, it's best not to assign a standard role to a user because they're least likely to match what you need exactly. But use those standard roles as a template. Rename those custom roles in your company's prefix. Always weigh and evaluate reasons for assigning a user multiple roles or give them a single custom roles. Sometimes it might be easier for the user to just have one role. Other times it's best to do multiple roles. It's just which one works best. Design and test new and custom roles before assigning it to the user. And you do that by verifying the role has all the permissions from start to end during the user acceptance testing process. Assign new and custom roles before a new user starts accessing their account. And if you ever need to rename an employee, please don't rename that former employee to a new employee. Create a new one instead. By renaming it, inherits all records of former employees. When an employee leaves, immediately remove their access to NetSuite. Mark them as inactive, and you can remove any roles and global permissions. Why is this so important? Because any employee with give access checked uses up a license. Also, you want to make sure that these people cannot access NetSuite because it can be accessed on the internet. You might want to untick give access, remove their email address so they cannot access NetSuite once they've left. If you want any additional resources, you can go into the NetSuite Help Center under Accounting Setup and review Managing Roles and Permissions, or the Center's overview. The SuiteAnswer Learning Center, you can refer to the training videos and training webinars as well. Now it's your turn to go towards your independent study time. What we want you to do is go back into NetSuite, the training account, and review that NetSuite Essentials tab. In there, you can access the workbook, Getting Started, and complete all of modules 1 through to 8, including all the exercises. You can refer to the podcasts as well, so these are just audio for you to listen about welcoming to NetSuite, NetSuite 1 methodology, and implementing a global company. There are optional videos you can watch that are referenced on the NetSuite Essential tab, and this is in regards to configuration and data security. Now, once you finish that whole workbook, it's a nice idea to go into the knowledge check and answer the 10-question quiz. That's just to make sure you actually understood what happened in workbook number 1. So go ahead, start your independent study. If you do have any questions at all, please remember to email us at instructor@netsuite.com.